ReefDudes is sponsored by Ecotech Marine and Bulk Reef Supply. Today, we're going to set up some physical buttons to control the Neptune Apex. What's going on, guys? Devin from ReefDudes. So I ordered these little buttons probably like a month and a bit ago online, and they finally showed up. They're cool little LED buttons. And what I'm going to actually do is make a little control panel here and have little buttons for feed mode, turn the blues on or off. If I'm live streaming, of course, one button puts it to whites type of thing, or kill the flow to the tank, like just different kind of things, physical buttons. So you can activate it without turning on your phone. Now, what you're gonna need to do this is a breakout box. So either Neptune or Vast Marine makes one. Now, if you're going with the light up buttons, I got ones that have a 24 volt LED, and I picked up the DC 24 to bare wire. And I'm really curious to see what these ones look like. So it looks pretty cool. So we have an option to set that up through there, and I'll be able to turn it on with that link port on and off. And yeah, it'd be kind of a fun way to do it. Now, I used to have the GHL here, which is no longer here. So I was looking if I can find a flat panel or a flat chunk of wood to drill a bunch of holes and mount it. But I think I'm actually gonna 3D print something that will fit just in here, and we'll use that as a control panel. So let's quickly mock this up and get to printing. Now for the actual designing, I use a program called Fusion 360, and it is a CAD program. It's pretty accurate, and it's free for personal use. So that one's win-win. Once our model's done, off to the printer. And I printed it, and a couple hours later, boom, we have our control panel. So I think that turned out pretty good. Now, one of the biggest things with 3D printing this, it is much more straight and lined up than if I was to drill it by hand. If I drilled by hand, I'm sure there'd be a little bit of a deviation in each one. Now, the real question is, does it fit? Oh, perfect. So it fits in there pretty nicely. I'll probably put a little dab of hot glue on there just for good measure. And once we unscrew the ring, it's a tight fit. Should have made that like 0.5 millimeter bigger, but I think she'll work. That turned out pretty good. Now comes the fun part of soldering. So on this, I'm actually going to be using the Vast Marine breakout box. If I could find the Neptune one, I would use that because it's physically smaller. The only really difference is this one gives you like stereo style plugs rather than screw terminals, and there's a ground for each one, whereas the Neptune box only has a single ground, which actually would have been better to clean up the wiring on this one, but that's okay. Now I did take off the back so you can see inside. It's basically, if you see the very bottom, there is one line that connects them all. So all the grounds are basically the same thing, so we only technically need to use one anyways. But this is what I have laying around, so this is what we're using. So if you don't like to solder, this is a great option. Now there's also switches you can get with bigger terminals where you can just have little connector ends on it. I don't mind soldering, so this is the route I'm going with. Now to start, I'm actually just going to connect the positive and the negatives, and those are what I put on the top and bottom. And this is going to be for the light up of the lights. These we actually just need fairly short little jump wires. So what I'm doing now is just called pre-tinning the wire. Just heats it up, puts a little bit of solder on it, and makes it easier for stuff to stick to it later. Now we're soldered. It's really that easy. Just a little bit of solder on it, touch the two together, and your joint is made. So we got our positives done, and we're going to do the same thing for our negatives. It's a relatively easy process, so don't be scared of soldering. It's definitely worth upping those skills if it's something you're interested in for building things. Okay, so we got one side for a positive or negative. Now this is a very simple switch with the breakout box. Basically all it does is, look, there's a connection between these two ports. So since they share a common ground, I'm going to actually link all the grounds together. So I'm going to do one more strip linking one of those pins, and then we're going to have a single lead off each one that goes to one of the reds on here. This might look more complicated than it is, but basically all we did is connect the same pin on the switches. So we got all the negatives on one line, we got the positives on one line, and then we got one side of the button press on the one side. So there's basically 3 wires right now that are connecting them all together. So now I'm going to put a little lead off each one of these. Now just as a quick refresher, on a normal button you only have 2 pins. So and when the button is pushed, it connects the 2 pins, and that's what tells the breakout box, okay, this is pushed. Now this one has 4 pins. We have a negative and a positive. That's just for the LED, so you could be much simpler and just use those 2 wires. And if you go in the simple mode, those 2 wires, literally each one goes to one of those and you're done. So it is pretty simple. And our switches are wired up. Now we just got to connect it to the breakout box and to power for the LEDs. Alright, we're going to go with the ever classy hot glue gun mount. Holds are in place, but still definitely removable if required. Now my button panel does hold itself in place pretty dang well, just from pressure fit, but I'm gonna add just a couple beads of glue around the perimeter just to be safe. Now since all these grounds are connected, it doesn't really matter which one we connected to on the VAS box. On the Neptune box, you only have the one lead to connect. Now if you want the light up LED switches, this is our DC24 cable, and we're just going to solder this to our positive and minus for the rails. We'll give this a quick test, make sure it works. And I do see them lit up, so that's awesome. Let's turn that off. Now the only thing left to do is connect all our wires to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and program it. So I'm going to start left to right just to make it easy. All right, now this should all be wired up. So pretty easy process. It probably, if you've never soldered before, it probably looks a little more complicated than it is. Only thing else to do now is plug in this breakout box cable to one of the Neptune modules or to the head unit. All right, so we got all our switches set up. Now each button, so each switch port goes to a button. So switch 1 to button 1, switch 2 to button 2, switch 3 to button 3, etc. Now in order to make it latch and do something, we're gonna need to create a virtual outlet. And to do that, if we go into our outlets, we can go on the top right and say add virtual outlet and call it whatever we want. So if we go back to the dashboard, each one of these is a virtual outlet. So I got button 1 feed mode, button 2 live stream, button 3 MP40's off, button 4 blues on, button 5 top down, skimmer off. Now because we're using a momentary button, we need to put some code in here. So here I tell it by default set off. Then if switch 1 button 1 is closed, aka the button's pressed, then on. So it turns it on. And now right here we need, this is very important, I have a defer statement. So wait 45 minutes, then off. So this is gonna say keep this button turned on for 45 minutes and then turn it off. So that is basically what I'm doing for my feed mode. Now if we come down, we find my return pump, I have a similar thing in here. So I say, so here's if feed A then off, so here's regular feed mode in my button. So if the button's on, then off. So it turns my return pump off as long as that button's on. And if we go back to the home page here, and if I was to click this to on, it would turn off my return pump for feed mode. Now also on a note in here, I also have code in my skimmer that turns off the skimmer if the return pump's off. I also have a live stream mode, and this will turn off my skimmer and it's going to turn off the reef brights on here. So here's my little live stream mode button. So again, set off, always put that in there. And if button 2 is pressed, so if the circuit's closed, then turn on, defer 180 minutes, so 3 hours, and then off. Now this is basically gonna shuts off my skimmer, shuts off the reef brights, you know, I can have it make my lights go white and just make everything be kind of one button ready to roll for live stream. So that's a bit of a special case for my setup. Again, I have a button for MP40's off. And in my MP40 outlet, I just say if this is on, then off. So if I want to clean the wet sides, super easy, push one button. I have another one for blues on, and this will turn on my reef bright. So if I want it to, you know, show off the tank or look at something at night, I can push this button. It'll turn my reef brights on for X amount of time. And top down this button, which will turn on the reef brights and it'll turn off my power heads. And this one's skimmer off. So if we look at the code for this one, it will turn my skimmer off for 30 minutes. That way, if I want to empty the cup and give it a quick clean, it turns off for 30 minutes, it'll automatically turn back on when I'm done. Now again, if we go back into the skimmer code, we can see what's happening here. So there's a bunch of different codes on this one, so fall back off, set on, so feed mode, turn off. If my turn pump's off, then turn off. If the live stream button is on, then turn off. If the skimmer off button is on, then turn off. And then after whatever happens, it's still gonna wait 5 more minutes and turn itself back on. And I generally do that just to give the return pumps time to get things flowing back in the system. We could probably put that down to 3 minutes. Make sure the water light's leveled, and then you're not gonna over skim by anything like that. Now to fancy things up a little bit, I think I'm actually gonna print some vinyl labels for what each button does, which look pretty good. Alright guys, so you have some super easy push button LEDs to control your Apex. Tons of cool things you can do with it. You can do this very cheap and simple with some simple momentary, some either switches, doorbell buttons, momentary switches, or if I get slightly fancier, you can go with the LEDs. Now, if you're gonna do the LEDs, I would advise buying 24 volt LED buttons. Then you can run it directly off the DC 24 port, and you don't use an outlet. So a couple of considerations, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this little project. If you did, as always, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new, make sure you subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.